Well, hello, and welcome to my cellar on Friday the 13th. Where do we start? Okay, healing. Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm frustrated as hell. I wish it was going faster. Doctor says it's fine. I said I want it to go faster, and he says, no, it takes 6 to 9 months. And he says, why do you think baseball players don't play or don't pitch again for a year or two? And you ain't a baseball player, so guess I'm stuck with it. Okay. In reference to something we talked about last week, I absolutely agree with the quick references for RPGs. I wrote one for AD&D just so I didn't have to slog through Gary's writing every time I wanted to roll a character. Well, we used to make stuff called playing aids, and for different games, board games, RPGs, and that's one I always thought we were missing out on. You had to read the rules to get the nuances, but should have had okay, do this, do this, do this, So I agree with that. I'm okay with any playing aid that helps you play faster, quicker, not interrupt a game to figure out a rules or a procedure or something. I'm all for that because we're there to play and not adjudicate. Okay, and this next one's in reference to that one. I know where you're coming from. I searched hard for simplistic breakdowns of games, rules, mechanics. Came to the same conclusion as yourself there. Have to make my own. Yeah, it is. And it's surprising to me that the game publishers haven't picked up on this yet. There's obviously a market out there for playing aids. There used to be playing aids put out. I think TSR might have even licensed a couple of them. Oh, I just noticed his collar's all up. So, oh well. Not trying to look yeah, Ming the Merciless. That's me. Yeah, make your own. I have when I used to do adventures at cons, not with my good pre-gens, the high level ones. I had a chart of them and all their ratings that I needed to know, so that I knew. They could say, oh, okay, such happened. And I'd look at my chart and I go, okay, roll such and such or higher than this or, whatever. So they used to wonder, how I knew. Well, I had a cheat sheet there on all of them. Just so I knew what was going on. I remembered what armor classes they were. It helped me. And anything that helps the DM, I believe, is a good idea. If it helps you, make it for yourself and help yourself. Do meteor strikes count as random encounters? Sorry. I guess if you're playing post-apocalyptic or a sci-fi game, they would. I would say that in terms of a random encounter, I think it'd be more likely a final encounter, don't you? If you're playing somewhere and all of a sudden a meteor hits nearby with any size at all. Now, if you're talking about little pea-sized meteors, but if you're talking with something, well, there's a shock wave. No, I wouldn't use meteor strikes as a random encounter. Now, if you pissed off a deity, well, they might decide to throw a meteor at you, but that's up to the GM and seems rather harsh unless it was a serious transgression. What happens if a magic item is fractured? Not broken, you understand, just fractured. Does magic leak out? Does the wielder suffer blowback and get a little of the item's effect back up on themselves? I'm having, okay, fractured. Fractured's Interesting word. If it were a globe or crystal or something like that, and it became fractured, I would say it would no longer function. That would be my ruling. Now, that's not to say that you couldn't somehow collect the pieces and go somebody and get a mending spell or something. No. If you destroy, in my opinion, in my ruling, if you destroy the vessel in which magic is held, the magic escapes, the vessel is destroyed, and the magic's gone. So if you're talking about a palantir or a scrying stone or some kind of magic crystal or something like that, and it gets fractured, gone. I can't apply the word fractured to a sword or an axe or a mace or a piece of armor or whatever, because they're going to, in reality, we know that it's abstract, but in reality, they're going to get binged up, dinged up. I don't feel that if you take a notch out of a sword, that it's going to lose some of its power. My ruling, your mileage may vary. Now, in the case of the blowback, if this magic item contained something that was inimical to the party, horrible gas, demon in gaseous form, pestilence, and it got fractured. If it just had a crack in it, if that's what your idea of fractured is, well, then I'd say it's really dangerous, and it's kind of like carrying around a bomb waiting to go off, because if I was the DM and you had a fractured something or other with a demon inside, every time you ran into something that was jarring, I'd give a chance for it to crack the rest of the way. The only solution to that would be, oh God, it's cracked, leave it here. It's like carrying an eggshell full of poison. Crack that eggshell, leave it here. There, wherever it was. Anyway, blowback. I'm of the opinion that any blowback would be harmful. On the other hand, if somehow or other in some sort of contretemps, well, I can't pronounce the French, some kind of setu, some good relic, like a pyx holding a host or something like that, were to be damaged, yeah, maybe you'd all get blessed for a little while, or maybe incur some points of damage. I don't see why not. I don't know there's any hard and fast rule, and I think that's one of the things that the DM should interpret and then be consistent with. But again, as always, that's the way I would do it. What is the most devious thing you had one of your PCs do? Well, as I have played PCs so infrequently, I've been a DM most of my career. The only thing I can think of that would be devious was I thought around something. Doug Ray at the North Texas RPG Convention likes to run celebrity games. He streams them, and I've played in several of them. And he likes to give you quirks. And I mean, this is just the way Doug plays. And one time, Sandy Peterson and I were playing, and I was a gnome illusionist who had no spells that actually did damage. And Sandy was another small, a halfling or something. And we ended up spending most of the adventure in great big woven panniers on either side of a pack horse, peeking out over the edge. And my quirk had been that I was a sex fiend. I had a sex addiction. Keep in mind, this is Doug, and these are all grown-ups playing, and we never got graphic, but he liked to give us, these little quirks. So I thought about this a minute, and I go, no, I'm not going there with you, Doug. So I told him that when we were gearing up, I wanted 2 large containers of goose grease. I didn't tell him why. And as we were going along, and he'd look down at me because, you got a quirk and mine's, and I'd say, shaking the basket here, boss, shaking the basket. And what are you talking about? I said, well, I brought 2 tubs of goose grease. He knew I'd gotten him, and that little quirk played no more part. It just every time I said shaking a basket, my whole end of the table would break out in giggles and titters, and the other end of the table had no idea what was going on. We won't go into how devious I've been as a DM because there is no depth to my deviousness. There is no limit to the depth of my deviousness. I enjoy seat of the pants rules myself. A player once decided his dwarf was going to jump out of a second-story window without opening it first. We exchanged looks for a second, and I blurted, "Okay, roll a d6 for damage." He happily rolled a d6, took his damage, and initiated combat with the enemies below. While that roll isn't in the book, it obviously wasn't argued against, and this is now a rule I use for anyone else jumping out of a second-story window without opening. Brilliant! Great! I think I might roll a d4, depending on how well they're armored, but no, it's not a criticism. It's a great idea. Now that's the way it works in your campaign. So you guys know they can jump out of second-story windows, take minimal damage, and I don't, is that an ability or a skill? Jumping out of second, self-defenestration? I don't know, but I think it's a brilliant ruling. Okay, now this next one is kind of eerie and creepy and threatening, or else some sort of compliment, I'm not sure. Our thirst for knowledge should have us squeezing your brain juices for every drop. My need of escaping from reality is a cup always in need of filling. Well, I'll tell you what, when I'm dead, you have my permission. If you get a hold of my wife before they cremate me, you can squeeze my brain. The most interesting thing will probably be the percentage of THC. I don't think the rest of it's going to do you any good. But if you got questions, you just put them in the comments after these goofy videos, and that's how you get the juice out of my brain. You got to do a little squeezing by asking a question or making a comment. That's all. Easy peasy. Well, yeah, everybody's cup for escape from reality is in need of at least a dollop of freshening, especially here we are again facing horrendous numbers, morons still refusing to wear masks, states that didn't are now being crippled. Anyway, we don't need to go there. That's for later. Recently was reading a first edition AD&D's player handbook and wondered why elves can live for 700 years, can it only advance to 7th level? Can you remember the reason for limiting long-lived characters in terms of levels? Was it purely for balancing character classes, limiting the power of elves? Yes. This is yet another example of Gary's humanocentric position in designing the game. Gary felt that humans should always be the good guys, the big guys, and that he did not want characters with special abilities like dwarves or elves or whatever who have these innate skills. He did not want them dominating the game. He wanted it to be a heroic quest by humans to achieve mastery. Yep, and that's why he did it. I never went along with that. I never went along with the level limits for dwarves, which is like 5th level. Yep. He violated that in the game I played in Lake Geneva in 1974 when I inherited a small duchy. So, that kind of let me know that, loosey-goosey, play it as you feel. That's why. If you got down to reality, you could make a case for Elrond being about a 30th level, well, in old school terms, a 19th level, 20th level wizard, which was just next to God, as far as skills and abilities and what have you. That's why he didn't want Elrond running the campaign. That's why he made wizards less able to survive and etc., because he didn't want wizards ruling the campaign. There was already a game out by M.A.R. Barker called the War of the Wizards. He didn't want D&D to become a weekly session of that. By the way, if you ever see that copy of War of the Wizards by M.A.R. Barker, you ought to pick it up. It's quite interesting. It's a lot of fun. Don't think it's about D&D. It isn't. It's its own rule set, its own imagined reality, but it's still a hell of a good game. Speaking of good games, bunch of us downloaded Ticket to Ride and the bundles and all that. So now we've given up Scythe for a while and we're playing Ticket to Ride. Just play something new, something different. And there's 4 of us every week that get on Discord and play something. Talk more about that later. Okay, on behalf of your troublesome Wheel of Blame players, I thank you for putting up with us and sending us the link. We couldn't have figured it out without you. Yeah, well, okay. I didn't realize it was that easy. I'm using my server this time. If I'm not happy with it, the next game I run, and I will be doing these at least once a month. The next game I run will be using North Texas's server, which is the top end, highest level, best video, best audio, etc. But we'll see how this game goes tomorrow. Okay. Okay, you find 1 potion of riding. What do you choose to ride? Drinking the full potion allows you to ride a creature or monster for a duration of time. Well, of course, I replied to that one. I said, I want to ride a boulet. And the response to that was, could be a short duration of time. But, oh, yeah, come on. Wouldn't you like to ride I'd love to ride a rhinoceros charging across the plains. Man, that would be a rush. I'd want a good saddle, etc. But, yeah, what a rush that would be. Okay. Now, this next is I'm not making light of it. And I'm tired of dealing with it. Hold on a second. I'm getting a little dry. All right. Who needs trigger warnings to help them avoid mental trauma from something they read or saw in a game? And he answers his own question. Millennials. Well, I guess it's them that's changing things around. I don't know. Has anybody done a study? It's pretty simplistic. I think more it would be woke players. I saw a quote by the late E.G. Gygax that D&D 3rd isn't the same game as previous editions of D&D AD&D. So, WotC can make their versions as politically correct as they want. The OSR has many games for the massive gamers who like the true feel of D&D. You're right. It isn't the same game. But and I'm not defending the other editions or anything. I'm just making a point here. I'll bet if you got an old enough copy that you'd find different rules for Monopoly way back. I believe a good game evolves. And sometimes the way they evolve is house ruling and making the game new again through house rulings or changing, making house rules. The next one goes on to say, I like the true feel of D&D. I feel like the true feel of D&D is having fun with others, and you can easily put something in your game that will make it extremely unfun for someone. If you got an issue discussing what's on and off limits in terms of subject matter for the game, you might want to reconsider running for other human beings. Yeah, there's a couple of things in there. Number one, when I used to run, when I still do the Wheel of Blame, I'm very careful. about what I put in. I try to judge the group as it goes along because it's it's a completely evolving game. And I try to judge the group. And before I start, I always make a point of anytime if the game starts veering somewhere where you're not comfortable, all you got to do is indicate, and without prejudice, I'll swing it another direction, because it's not always me that takes it there. It can be other players. One of the other players takes it somewhere where that person's uncomfortable. So I make those ground rules clear at the beginning. Don't sit here and squirm. Say something, and we'll take a left turn and go another direction, or a right turn, whatever. That's the point, though. And you're right. You may want to look for different humans to play with, simply because if I were to sit down and run a campaign today, I know who I'd invite to be in it, and I'd know exactly where I could go with it, anywhere I wanted. And they'd all laugh and cheer and follow along with me because we've been playing other games together for 20-some years. If I were bringing in new characters, this was a friendly local game store game that I ran every third Tuesday or whatever the hell it was, and we wanted to expand, yeah, then I'd be careful with new players. And before even the first game, I would sit down with them or sit on the phone or, whatever, rhetorically here, metaphorically, and say, the same thing. If it goes to where you're uncomfortable, whatever, say something, and we will take a turn and go somewhere else. The whole woke thing has got everybody in an uproar, everybody rethinking themselves. As a DM, you got to know your players. And if you know your players, you know where you need to go and where you don't need to go. It all depends on the group of players. If you're a fluctuating, changing group with different players coming in and out, dropping out, joining in, whatever, well, yeah, then you gotta consider that. But in my estimation, the majority of role playing is played amongst groups of friends who know each other, so they know where they can go or where they can't. They know how graphic or coy they have to be. Depends on the composition of your table. I can't see your table, so I can't give you individual advice. Nobody wants to cause their friends discomfort, mental, physical, whatever. So why would you? No good reason. Where are we at on this? Look at the time here. I have no idea. All right. Last thing I'm going to talk about. I popped off on Facebook last week about people getting all over the staff of GaryCon, deluging them with, when can we get our records, when can we get our badges, yada, 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 yada. Under normal circumstances, this is completely understandable. Under normal circumstances, they wouldn't have to be asking. People that bought badges for last year's GaryCon still have them. This year's GaryCon is also not going to be physical. It's going to be virtual again. I'll be running at least one virtual game every day that GaryCon runs. What I really truly don't understand is why anybody thinks getting together to game right now with a bunch of strangers, I don't care if you're 6 feet or 16 feet apart, why anybody thinks that's a good idea. Right now, as I speak, 46 states have record numbers of cases, new cases. Yeah, game's fun, but I want to play with you again next year and the year after. That's why I'm not going to cons. Aside from the fact that my immune system is compromised, I don't want to give it to you. Why this? I don't know. Maybe it's a tribal thing. Oh, we got to get together. We got to have a powwow, a mountain man thing. We got to have a rendezvous. No, we don't. No, we don't. This thing is going to get worse before it gets better. Mark my words. It's a horrible prediction, but I feel it's accurate. It's going to get worse. We don't need to kill each other at cons. We can play online. We can play virtually. There's lots of new ways to do this now that are rising out of the pandemic. The second wave could be worse than the first because of environmental conditions, being in houses together, etc. Right now, the only people that I've had in my home for months are members of my family. And for a few months, we didn't have them in either. We're now really, I'm in Ohio, and they say no more than 10 people. And my family's larger than that. So we're stuck on the horns of a dilemma. Now, granted, we're two over, and a couple of them are tiny, but I don't want to expose my great grandbabies. I don't want to be exposed by their parents, or because they are out working. I'm not. Cheryl and I stay home most of the time. Today was a big day. We went grocery shopping. Back to seriousness, though. Give it up. In-person game conventions are impractical and carry a big element of death wish in them. To want to go to one and take that risk. And it can be somebody that got infected on the way. It doesn't matter. We could all be tested within a week and have to show those results to be able to come and show. Doesn't matter. One person getting there could have been exposed, bring it in, and now we have the perfect situation for a perfect storm of infection, a major spreader event. I know it sucks not to be able to play face to face. Believe me, I know. I had game nights going at least twice a month, and I haven't had them since March. Playing online is fun, but it's not the same. Even when we're all hooked up on Discord and can insult the pants off each other, it's still not the same. You don't get the facial response when you really zap somebody. And, it's the collective fun, after all, and whatever makes fun in your game. In my circle, ragging on each other, and especially if we're playing boards, doing each other a dirty turn, is the way we play. It's not worth dying for. It's not worth having long term. They're calling them the long haulers. We have no idea how many people that have gotten COVID and recovered are yet. We haven't counted how many have respiratory illnesses, how many have mobility issues. There's all these long-term effects that are popping up in people. Gamers tend to be in the smarter section of the curve. Why aren't we acting like it? If it's politics, he's gone. All right. I know about politics. I promised that I would. I have been working on this in my head for over a week now, still waiting for the final results. And when that comes out, not the electoral college, but the other stuff, I will. I've been thinking about it from the point of, if I were still teaching history 20 years from now, or political science, how would I explain the last 4 years? So, that's some heavy shit coming up later. In the meantime, wear your mask. Don't go out any more than you have to. Sneeze into your elbow and wash your hands a lot. My hand, I have peripheral nerve damage in my hands from the chemotherapy, so they're already screwed up and tingly. Well, all this clean crap with the sanitizer has just made it worse. But when I think about it, feeling that nose, I'm not dead yet. And on those words, I'll say, Dodata Gobi. Oh, hello. I'm still figuring out when this thing starts. Welcome to my cellar.
He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs. Still quite a feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Last man around when them rates went down. Calling Gary in that Lake Geneva town. Hey Gary, it's an awful mess. Let me edit, we'll have success. D&D and Dragon Magazine. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Magic missile, it's a mortar shell. Make it hit in the first level spell. Brought psionics to the game to attack that wizard brain. PSR and fantasy, collection of micro armory. Titan with tramp under a tree, high as could be. He's the curmudgeon who wrote about the dungeons. Now he's the feller, live from the cellar. Talks about D&D and old school RPGs, but he's still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Still quite the feller, the curmudgeon in the cellar. Curmudgeon.